Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Telescope Podcast. Thank you for listening.
What's up, everybody? Everyone in this place, if you could do a handstand, I want to see your feet up in the air right now. Wave them around, that's right. Woo!
Hello. Welcome to the Telescope Podcast, the show where we look at culture through the spyglass of faith. My name is Matthew Seipel Anderson, host of the show. So glad you're listening. It's kind of a weird one. It is 2 a.m. as I record this. I fell asleep putting my son to bed and slept in his bed from like 9 to midnight. Got up, cleaned up the house. My wife's taking care of our daughter. She's been under the weather. And after cleaning up for like an hour, I decided I better come down and rock the podcast. So here I am. Today, I'm going to be talking about the drug and alcohol crisis that's going on in our country. And before I hop into that, I tried to do an interview on this topic, and I've been finding that doing interviews is a little harder than I thought, tracking people down and nailing them down on a time. So I'll probably be continuing the interviews, but doing some more of these solo shows just to keep the content rolling, because there's such a huge demand. People are knocking down my door to get these amazing shows. Anyway, and I actually did an interview on this topic with someone with some real authority who's worked in the field, but it was my first attempt at a Skype interview, and it failed. I went through the whole interview, and my audio recorded, but my guests did not, so that was a bummer. And I haven't been able to reschedule anything, but I wanted to get a new show out because it's been a little while. Yeah, sometimes you try your best, and it doesn't work, so you just gotta pick up and try again. So, enough moping about that. Anyway, let's just hop into this. I did not realize how bad the drug crisis was in our country, but I found some really interesting articles both on CNN and the New York Times on this topic. So I'll just share a few of the things I learned and share a verse. And oh man, I'm going to yawn. Hold on a second. Did I mention it's 2 a.m.? Hope I don't put you to sleep. If you listen to this and it's like 2 in the afternoon, you got that afternoon tired thing going on, I don't want you going off the road, so, Anyway, I wish I had a joke, but it's 2 a.m. I've got nothing. I've just got these articles and my notes here. So, let's jump into it. I think I said that already once. Let's jump into it. All right, get on with it already. So anyway, there's this article from CNN titled, "This is America on Drugs." And I've actually got it right in front of me. I'm going to pull it up real quick here. I don't have it in front of me. I lied. All right. Anyway, the most important thing that really caught my attention in this article is drugs, and specifically opioids, are now the leading cause of accidental death in the U.S. In the New York Times article, they clarified that a little bit. They said it's the leading cause of accidental deaths in the U.S. for people under 50. There are more drug overdoses than gun-related deaths, more drug overdoses than fatal car accidents. Isn't that crazy? It blows my mind. I mean, I always think of car accidents as being one of the main things that kills people. Now, of course, this isn't more deaths than like things like heart attacks and stuff. But in the category of accidental deaths, opioid overdoses are the leading cause. It just blew my mind. The trend is being driven by abuse of prescription opioids and also the use of heroin, because heroin is apparently inexpensive compared to other illicit drugs. And there's new new versions of heroin that include other opioids mixed in. And so that's just I guess apparently the addicts aren't used to the strength of this new heroin, and they're shooting up with their normal amount, and it's killing them. Let me just read this opening paragraph. This is from a New York Times article from June 5th, 2017, titled "Drug Deaths in America Are Rising Faster Than Ever." It's by Josh Katz. You can find it on NewYorkTimes.com. It says, Akron, Ohio. Drug overdose deaths in 2016 most likely exceeded 59,000. That's just in one city. The largest annual jump ever recorded in the United States, according to preliminary data compiled by the New York Times. You know, it's funny, I'm really into Star Wars. It's kind of like my little guilty pleasure. I always look at, every day I look at the news, a few news websites, and I also look at the news on www.starwarsnewsnet.com, little plug. It's a cool site, and they are super up to date on Star Wars news. And then at the bottom, there's always, trying to get you to click onto other stories and stuff. And there was a story about Data, the character from Star Trek: The Next Generation. So, anyway, I see the word data in a sentence, and that's all I can think of. A little drink of water there. That's the thing with robots, they don't do drugs. They can literally plug themselves into a wall outlet probably and, get like a jolt of energy. And it's probably like doing drugs for a robot, being plugged in, having that electricity go through their circuitry. Us, we've got built-in chemicals to give us that high feeling, adrenaline and dopamine and all that stuff. There's another article over on CNN.com. It says, study finds 1 in 8 Americans struggles with alcohol abuse. I'll read the beginning of this topic. Americans are drinking more, a lot more, according to a new study published in JAMA Psychiatry. An estimated 1 out of every 8 Americans struggles with an alcohol disorder. If I skip down, there's another heading that says women, minorities, and older people among the most affected. So that's something else that's interesting. People are dependent on alcohol. They have... Here's just some of the things. There's a list of 11 risk factors, or I guess telltale. Here, let me just see. 11 criteria was given. The presence of 2 or more indicated an alcohol use disorder. 6 or more indicates a severe alcohol use disorder. The article doesn't give all 11, which I'd be curious to read, but they give 4 examples. Drinking interfering with home, family, or job responsibilities. Drinking increasing chances of danger or injury. Withdrawal symptoms when coming down from intoxication. And inability to stop drinking. And all this reminds me of a story that I heard recently. There's a guy at our church, and he came and he gave his testimony at our youth group. And I guess working through his testimony backwards, when we first met him, he had just come out of a coma. And the coma was a drug-related thing. He had, done drugs or whatever and went into a coma. And he was in a coma for several months. And, people were praying for him and going in his hospital room and putting their hands on him and praying over him. And some of the hospital staff got to, or learned about him, and they were believers, so they were in there praying over him during their lunch breaks and stuff. And anyway, he came out of it, and then his muscles didn't work because he'd been in that state for so long. His muscles were all seized up, and they told him he would never walk again. They told him he was all messed up. So slowly and steadily, though, he went through physical therapy, and his heart was so touched by the people that were praying for him and believing that he was going to come out of that his faith rose up, and he gained a fresh faith in Christ, and kind of had a second chance. And today he's walking, he's remarried, he's got kids, and he's being a good dad. He's a good brother in church. So amazing story. But the thing about his story that really caught me is the beginning of his story, because just talking about how him and his cousin started to smoke marijuana, and then he got caught by an older relative at one point at a family get together, at a family picnic or something. They were smoking weed out in the bushes or something, and they got caught. And he remembers that moment where he was so scared that he was going to be harshly reprimanded and doing drugs. And it turns out that the family member, I don't remember who it was, that caught him was also like a closet marijuana smoker, and this guy complimented them and just let him go, basically, kind of gave him a wink and let him go. And man, terrible. That should have been stopped right there. But anyway, so things progressed as he got older. He just told a story about being at a party, and he said everyone was around this table snorting this white stuff and then acting all crazy and having a super good time. And he just observed that they were doing it and it wasn't killing him. And so pretty soon he tried it. And that was the next step into more hardcore drugs, which almost killed him. And then now he said, looking back, he just listed off name after name after name after name of people from that time in his life when he first got started who are now dead from drugs. And it's a terrible, tragic thing. And so, things like alcohol and drugs, these are classic issues that pastors soapbox on. Don't be doing the drugs, don't be drinking. It can sound like a broken record. But I think something that's deeper than just drugs, because, okay, think about this. If you put somebody in a room with drugs, and they've never done drugs before, they're not an addict, if they've got half a brain, they're not going to touch it, right? Because everybody knows, every adult knows, drugs can ruin your life, It's a no-brainer. The issue is friendships. The issue is relationships, because it's hard to say no to your friend. It's hard to be that guy that's going to walk away or going to be the buzzkill, right? You don't want to be that guy. And so his story just clicked something in my head, because I've personally never done drugs. So that's a foreign world to me. But I mean, everybody knows what it's like to have friends, to have peer pressure, and to, get swept away with that, right? I mean, even if it's something as stupid as going to a movie you don't really want to see, but all your buddies want to, it's all right, well, whatever, I'll just go see it. You just get swept along. And so that's totally understandable to me. And there's a verse, 1 Corinthians 15:33. I'm going to read it out of the New International Version. It says, "Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character." Again, and that's advice that's as old as dirt, and everybody knows it, but putting it into practice and being willing to cut off those relationships and to say no to those friendships, that's also difficult. But I think that if a person was to take a good hard look at their friendships and begin to find some new friendships and distance yourself, you could really save yourself a lot of problems, because it's those friendships that sweep you along into things that you don't want to be a part of. And that was the challenge that we left our youth ministry with that night, was, you gotta look long and hard about or at your friendships and be willing to make some hard choices. Now, I want to end the show by giving some resources out. First of all, there's an organization called Teen Challenge, and I've played a lot of music for them. They're a faith-based drug and alcohol program, and I'm Googling them right now. It is 2:18 in the morning, so forgive me for not being totally prepared. Here we go. I mean, if you're in Minnesota, it's www.mntc.org, or you can just Google Teen Challenge. So, if you're out there, if you're like, man, I'm struggling, that would be a good place to start. Just Google Teen Challenge, call them up. They do residential stuff, and a lot of their people are volunteer, go there voluntarily. A lot of their people are court-ordered, so that's a different mindset, but it's better than prison, and so a lot of them end up there. It is faith-based, so you're going to hear God as the higher power, and you're going to hear, the power of God over addiction and also just with some other practical things. I'm not an expert, obviously. I'm just kind of I'm just pulling this stuff out of who knows where. I do know a tiny bit about the program. Like I said, I've played for their Spiritual Emphasis Week. It's a thing they do a couple times a year where they just do I'd say it's kind of like a conference. They bring in a speaker, they meet somewhere that's off-site for them, so it feels fresh, it feels like an event, and then they'll bring in someone to do praise and worship music. And so I've done that a number of times for them, and it's an awesome gig, super touching, just sitting there. I love watching the ministry times, like at the end of the preaching, there's usually a time for guys to come forward and respond to the message, and the speaker will pray for them and listen to them, share what they're going through, and then he'll pray for them. And sometimes it can be powerful. I mean, those guys are up there crying and shaking, and if you're listening, I don't know where you're at with all this stuff, but I've seen demons come out of these guys. I've seen them. It's been pretty wild. Some of these services are wild, and the spiritual world is a real thing. So Jesus cast out demons in the Bible, and it still happens today. So anyway, Teen Challenge is a resource. Another resource, if you're... Here, give me a second to just think. I can't think and talk at the same time. Celebrate Recovery, that's what it's called. You ever had those moments? Celebrate good times. Come on. Don't think it's quite that vibe there, but celebrate good times. Come on. All right, here we go. CelebrateRecovery.com. Celebrate Recovery, I have not been a part of Celebrate Recovery, but a lot of churches host Celebrate Recovery groups. So it's kind of like, my impression of it anyway, is it's a group that meets regularly of people who are, just walking on the road of staying clean. So CelebrateRecovery.com is the website, and it looks like they've got tons of resources for how to start a group yourself. They've got videos. It looks like they've got conferences that they host around the country. They've got their literature, their books you can get from them, stuff you can buy. If you want to find a group in your area, you can check that out. There's resources. So, just want to throw out a few things so that if you're dealing with this issue, if you're, maybe you're like a functional alcoholic and you're like, you know what, I don't need this in my life. I just want to break out of this and have a more, wholesome lifestyle. Check this stuff out, and God will help you. I'm trying to think if I know any other resources. Those are the two big ones that pop to mind, and I don't want to need to sit and ramble on, but hey, thanks so much for listening. I'm going to have more content coming soon. if there's something you want me to think on and comment on, that would be cool. I saw Spider-Man the other day, so maybe I'll do a Spider-Man show. That'd be fun. Anyway, again, my name is Matthew Seipel Anderson. This is the Telescope Podcast. You can connect with me on Twitter, MSA_music. Maybe I should get a Twitter account for the podcast. I just use my one Twitter account because it's what I started for my music stuff. So anyway, MSA_music on Twitter. I'm on Facebook, the Telescope Podcast. Also Mr. MSA, because my name's too hard to remember, so I do Mr. MSA for my music stuff. Anyway, have a great night. What's left of it anyway for me, hopefully is great, and thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
What's up, everybody? Everyone in this place, if you could do a handshake.